Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the August 9th, 2023 regular meeting of the Duck Planning Board to order. It's 6:30 p.m. First order of business, public comments. Hearing none. New business, ordinance 23-12, text amendment to the residential parking standards found in section 156.092 of the zoning ordinance to clarify that crush and run and similar materials are impervious materials. Joe?
All right, Mr. Chair, the members of the board, we have before you today is your first time that you've seen this. This was an item that we presented to the town council, and they authorized us being staff and the board to review this. The issue we've had is we've had several occasions over the past few months where we've been working with the contractor or owner on a new parking area and discovered that they had underlaid a gravel parking area with what we consider crush and run to be an impervious surface. So we had a lot of discussion about this, and we've done some research, and everything that we've run across seems to support consideration of crush and run as an impervious surface. And due to the nature and the reason why the town, has gravel parking surface requirements, is that it increases the amount of permeable material that, so it decreases lot coverage, it decreases runoff on property. So with that being the intent, we felt that it certainly seems to undermine the intent to have a subsurface or a base that is largely, if not totally, impervious. So the intent of this is to clarify that those surfaces are impervious, and you can see in the draft ordinance, all we did was add a single sentence in there, and it serves a dual purpose of, making it clear that we consider crush and run and similar materials as an impervious surface, and we note, and then it again serves a dual purpose, that those materials do not comply with this standard and cannot be used as surface or subsurface materials if someone is using that in a gravel parking area. So that is what we developed as a proposal, and we're glad to discuss any facets of that proposal with the board before it moves on. That's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Members, questions? Bren?
No, it's pretty clear.
James?
Yeah, it's straightforward and I support it, but I just have a question. Are there any industry standards that we can base our decision on?
Well, the industry would, just being honest and upfront with you, as far as from a functional standpoint, having a sub-base that is impervious or stronger is gonna help the function of that parking area as a support vehicle, so the industry would probably support a stronger subbase. But that's not, our intent is not to provide the strongest possible subbase. Our intent as a town was to provide a pervious area where stormwater could go through, with the understanding that underneath it may not be the strongest material in the world, but it is, pardon me, it is something that we, seems to work in almost all instances by having a thick enough gravel surface.
Yeah, I understand that. My question was a little different. So are there any standards out that suggest that
Bless
it
you.
is a pervious material?
That it is pervious or impervious?
When used for parking or driveways, our engineer, as well as some other engineers, have indicated that it is not.
And as we have in the staff report, the state studied that issue, that very specific issue.
Well, right here.
Yeah, so,
Oh,
Yeah, on the staff report, we outlined that the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources actually did a very, very comprehensive study and determined their surfaces impervious, and they would not accept those as
Joe?
No, I have nothing, I think it's
Okay.
okay.
My only comment would be that I'm just curious how staff's going to handle, I mean, this is a change to the ordinance. It said loose stone over sand, and you've now got almost 20 years' worth of driveways that potentially have crush and run under them because it wasn't in the ordinance. How do you foresee handling, when a survey comes back with the gravel driveway, what is that, how is that going to work?
We've been checking now, because before we just assumed that meant it was pervious. We assumed that there was nothing underneath it, there was impervious, and only occasionally did we find things. I'll let Cindy, she looks like she's got something to add.
So there was a time when we had former planning directors and they would check that. They would, in fact, ask surveyors to notate that. You would think after a period of time that that becomes common knowledge. Clearly, it's not. We had a recent experience where someone proposed a gravel driveway. The surveyor noted at the completion of the project that it was gravel over crush and run. They came back the following year for a permit, and they couldn't do what they wanted because they were over coverage. They worked to resolve that issue. Recently, we've had 2 instances where one, staff identified crush and run going down and questioned the practice. Second, just recently, as of like last week, I asked the homeowner, what'd you put down as your base? And he said crush and run. I said, well, the crush and run's not pervious, so that's not going to work with our ordinance. Some surveyors will note whether it's gravel over crush and run, some will not. There are certainly gravel driveways that have crush and run under them. Are we going to go out and search them out and ask them to replace them? No. But moving forward, we're moving in a good direction to try and mitigate that from happening in the future.
So, but there's nothing that's going to be in the ordinance that's going to indicate that crush and run became unacceptable on the date that council approves this.
I would argue from a staff perspective and policy, we have never accepted crush and run as permeable.
That's what you're saying, but obviously that was not common knowledge because you are admitting that you know that there's some out there and that you've had to ask people to take it out.
Well, it was proposed on the site plan as gravel. When they got the as-built done, they showed gravel over crush and run, and it was counted as coverage.
Sure. But how many driveways are out there, since crush and run was not mentioned in the ordinance, that may have it mixed in, that it can't really be evaluated at this point?
know.
I'm just curious how you're going to...
I have an intern starting in September, we can certainly research it.
No, it matters when people go back to do something else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
About the past.
Yeah.
You talking about as a date going forward.
I'm just wondering if someone applies for a permit where they don't have, there's no change to lot coverage.
I'm sorry, there's no change.
There's no change to lot coverage, so no final survey is required. But they have a gravel driveway.
We are going to assume that they have met the requirement until we're proven otherwise. I mean, the one that we had last year where they came back with the as-built survey, you know, they applied for a new permit and we're like, well, you can't do that now because you're over coverage. They worked to rectify that situation.
It seems clear that it has the votes to pass, and I'm not going to hold it up, but I think that,
We will probably implement a inspection requirement at some point.
right, and my point is, we're not doing that. And I think James, when he was asking for technical information, may have been looking in that direction. I mean, like, what is the definition of crush and run? Are we taking a bill of lading from the trucking company? I just,
That's why it also says in similar materials. Okay. We had someone who came to us with a proposal to mix. They were going to create their own mix. And we said, well, we need an engineer to certify that it's permeable. If you have an engineer who is stamped and said that that mix is going to be permeable, then we'll accept it.
do we need to have any, I mean,
So that's
it's
why
not in the ordinance?
we have crush and run and similar materials, similar impervious materials, you know, so that we can, you know, get around. You know, we don't want to play games with people. We don't try to get around. You know, we want to be as clear what the intent is. You know, we don't need to spell out all the don'ts in every ordinance. If we don't say you can't use concrete, you can't use asphalt, you know, we don't list every impervious surface in the world. But in this case, we've run across enough instances that we felt it necessary to spell it out. So that's how we're looking at doing with this.
Okay, so this is stating that crush and run is impervious, but I'm kind of listening to the comments from Mr. Cofield and Mr. Murray, Chair Murray, about if it is permeable, do we need to have something to certify, whether it's something from a survey or something that says there is no crush and run, that this is going to be a gravel driveway, there's nothing underneath of it, and it does not count towards lot coverage? Like, how do we check that box that it is or it isn't? Is it possible even?
Yeah, well, we can certainly, when we see surveys that say gravel driveway, we can certainly say, you need to specify what the base is. I will tell you, there are some surveyors that will do that. Some are going to kick back and they're going to say, that's not my job,
Okay.
you know, and it's going to be a task.
So the good thing is we have some tools for those of you who've been involved in the beach grass planting. We have some tools that we could use to punch through that gravel and get a sense of what's underneath.
Well,
And that can help us determine whether or not if there's a question about it.
That kind of illustrates my point and makes me uncomfortable. If gravel is compacted enough to drive on, if you just spread gravel over sand, you can't drive on it. It has to be compacted. So if it's compacted, trying to push a probe through it is not telling you definitively what product is under there. So
Again, that's if we have known, if it's already done and we know the way of doing it, that's a way that we can inspect and try to identify if we're not getting any information from the contractor or owner.
And what about the permeability of the surface as a test?
Here's the problem, Mark. I've talked to our town engineer, Mike Robinson.
Too simple.
I talked to Dave Klebitz today from Bissell Engineering, and all I asked was, what are your thoughts on crush and run? Is it permeable or not? And they both indicated it was not permeable.
However,
State standards also say that it's not permeable.
which we don't subscribe to. We don't subscribe to the state standards. The state calls gravel parking lot coverage, impervious, all gravel parking, regardless of the structure underneath of it. The county, Dare County and Duck are the only two municipalities that have, up to today, not counted gravel parking as lot coverage. And my point is not that, I'm not arguing whether crush and run is permeable or not. My point is, it was not explicitly prohibited in our ordinance prior to today. The ordinance is 20 years old. There's a lot of crush and run out there. And there's a lot of people who have purchased houses that they didn't build, who have surveys that say gravel driveway that doesn't count as lot coverage.
So you're suggesting that we set a date that says, as of this date, moving forward, existing driveways would be exempt?
I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but I wanted the board to discuss it. Some way to protect people who were not subject to this. And it's not, I feel like it's being characterized as like a no-brainer. Obviously, crush and run is impermeable, but that is not the case. The county doesn't count it, and we, as an outlier, have not counted gravel parking as lot coverage for this long period of time. So I just think we need to be more careful than just simply saying, oh, well, we always assumed that crush and run was not allowed, and now we're going to codify that. I feel like it could create a problem.
So for example, we've got.
You could also clarify the language a little further and say that presence of fines in the gravel, that is what typically makes it become impervious. Just thought.
I'm not sure that further defining the issue is important here. I think, and with Mark's question, I have a little different understanding of what he was getting at. And like most new ordinances, it's effective the date of the ordinance. But from what I hear, that's not exactly the situation here.
I didn't catch the last part of what you said.
I'm sorry, that's not exactly the situation here. So what would be the, let's cite an example. If someone had the material down as a subsurface and had gravel over it, and they were adding to the parking area, obviously we wouldn't count it as a pervious material for the additional couple spaces. But if it didn't touch what's there now, how would you view it? How would you look at it?
But if the road did not, typically we would have the parking, if they were changing the parking area, they would be required to bring it into compliance with whatever standards there are at that time. That would include things potentially like setbacks or, the layout of the parking area. And so, I would, to be consistent, we would look at that.
You
And
look at the whole parking area, not just the additional 2 parking spaces.
if they were changing the layout of it,
Gotcha.
yes, sir.
So the important thing is there if they're changing the layout.
I guess I'm comfortable with that. If they would-
I guess the thing that it boils down to, and your question kind of helped distill it in my mind, if in essentially every other part of the zoning ordinance, right? If somebody's got concrete parking and they've got a pool deck and they've got a house and they have a survey that shows their lot coverage, it's reasonable to expect that these surfaces that no one is arguing about are impervious, they count as lot coverage. This is a surface that staff, in your explanation, is saying some surveyors count it and some surveyors don't. So I just feel like just saying we don't accept this officially is not enough, because there's a mess from prior to today that we don't know if we have to clean up or we don't, because I guess it depends on which surveyor you call.
I assume that with those 2 surveyors Mark is talking about, you'd ask the surveyor today where you wouldn't have asked him last month, what's the subsurface?
Right. So that's what's changed, but before it was up to the surveyor,
Yeah.
So,
unlike anything else. I'm sorry, unlike anything else. This is the only thing that's been left up to the surveyor. That was my point.
so if someone is, bless you, making a change, maybe they're not changing anything to do with the existing driveway, all of that parking should count towards lot
We
coverage.
would count it toward lot coverage if that's it, where you're headed with it. Yeah, so we wouldn't necessarily require that, no, we
Bless
take
you.
it up, but we would require that it be counted like it should have been. It's like somebody who didn't get a permit for
Right.
something. We run across that every week. Somebody submits a permit for something, and we go out on site to look. There's something there that shouldn't be there. It was done without a permit. It may have been that, or it may have happened 10 years ago. But if it was never permitted, we don't allow them, they have to factor that into the equation for what they want to do now. We don't just say, we forgive it, and you don't have to consider that. So it's the same premise.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit of an unfair characterization to equate a shed or something that someone built without a permit to a driveway that you approved. That
It
you
didn't count for lot coverage.
that didn't
but
count
now
for
it
lot
does.
coverage that you approved prior. And also, how do you have that conversation with the homeowner when they're standing there saying it's gravel and you're saying, no, it's gravel with crush and run? And you say, okay, we'll get a survey, and they go get one survey and it says it's gravel with crush and run, and they get another survey and it says it's gravel. I mean, how do you substantiate that 10 years down the road once everything's migrated into the sand and there's grass growing up through it?
If it's migrated into the sand and you can't find crush and run, then it should be gravel, correct? If that's what crush and run does, then it should be a moot issue.
Yeah, but what if they didn't have crush and run? What if they had 57 stone, and after driving on it for 10 years, small pieces of it have broken off and it looks like crush and run? These are things that are gonna be an issue.
Here, would a date solve this as of the enactment?
The problem with that is we'd be allowing a major lot coverage.
Well, and that's the thing, is we don't count gravel as lot coverage, and that's intentional to make sure that we're leaving that area permeable. And if
Right.
there's crush and run under it, it is not in the long run, permeable based on engineers. And even though we don't go by the state standard. So what is our goal here? Is our goal to help mitigate flooding? Because that was one of the things that we did in 2004, in 2007, I think, to help with that.
Right, but you have all these gravel driveways with crush and run under
Well,
them, and we
I guess
haven't had,
We just need to be more particular about what we look at when we go out and do inspections and cannot assume good intentions.
I would assume that if we were trying to solve a problem that we didn't solve with the driveways that we have, that the problem would be evident. But the problem would be, if these driveways were not permeable or permeable enough, the ordinance does not say permeable, it says semi-permeable. So reasonable minds could have thought that this was okay and did, and installed it, and we don't have stormwater running off of gravel driveways that are elevated above the road. So I don't know. It's being presented as extremely clear. And while the argument of whether or not crush and run is impervious may be clear, what we're doing to the ordinance, I feel, is not clear because the horse is already out of the barn.
Well, how exactly would you word it?
I don't believe that gravel over sand is a suitable driving surface. So I think if we want permeable gravel driving surfaces, you've got to institute the use of a geomatting or something to hold that rock in place. I will point out that many of those geomatting products call for a 2-inch layer of ABC compacted underneath of them, which is crush and run.
Yeah.
And they're permeable products specified by the manufacturer. So I don't know. Allowing gravel parking to be counted as permeable was risky, and here we are.
Do we have crush and run under our lot over here by the shed that has the grid structure?
I'd have to look at the specs.
Just
My
curious.
guess is there's probably about 8 inches of rock before the grids,
Okay.
and then there's pea gravel in the grids. And it can be done with 57 rock without the fines.
It can be,
Okay.
but you do need the grid.
And we could leave it as is, and we can just start doing inspections.
I think that you need language about crush and run in there. I just want to know what's going to happen with, and I think I hear what's going to happen. You're just going to have people ripping driveways out left and right. There's going to be gravel on sale.
And I think that might be part of the intent, to get them into compliance if they weren't. Is that, I think, what we're saying here?
That's the intent of why we would do that, why we, we have a whole section of our ordinance that deals with non-conforming situations.
7 rock is pretty
So we would treat it like that.
Well, I think the proposal gets us to where we want to go, which is more permeability. I do think it's a little sticky in the way that Mark talks about it. But that's, when you change regulations along the way, that regardless of what the regulations are, that's sort of what happens. It gets us to where we want to go with respect to permeability.
I agree.
There's no easy solution to say for all these people who've done it this way, there's a new way of doing it. And you all are the people who have to deal with it. So I'm comfortable. I wish it was clearer and easier, but it is what it is. There's no way to get where you want to go without doing something like this.
I agree with
That's
James.
it.
I agree with what James is saying. I think maybe my issue is just in how it's being characterized. It's not just a clarification. It's a change of the ordinance. And I don't know if this is the last, if you guys feel comfortable moving forward with this, I'll hear a motion, but I hope this isn't the last time we talk about this ordinance, because I feel like it still has in there loose stone over sand, which you can't drive on. You just can't.
Yeah, once you can.
Yeah, right, you can drive on it once until you're stuck.
Now it's gonna be tough.
So, yeah, I mean, do we hear a motion?
Yeah, I would move that we approve the ordinance 23-12 text amendment to the residential parking standards found in section 156.092 of the zoning ordinance to clarify that crush and run and similar materials are impervious materials.
Do I hear a second?
Does he know what he said?
I'll second it.
Additional discussion? I have one additional question for staff. Do we need to clarify, we require gravel parking. We also don't count gravel parking as lot coverage under the current ordinance. If someone says, I will install the gravel parking because it's required, but I'll count it as lot coverage, but I want to put this under it, is that allowed under the ordinance?
So long as it's permeable
If,
or semi-permeable.
if they want to have it as, if they're counting it, if they're not asking for the,
So outside of the 20-foot wide maximum concrete drive aisle, it says you have to have permeable parking. We currently allow, if your house, let's say your house is 40 feet wide, we allow you to bring a concrete drive aisle in, and then you can fan it out to the width of the house. If you have required parking outside of that, then it has to be permeable in nature. And that means that it's either gravel or over sand, or permeable pavers, which we're seeing a lot now, that has a 57 base, plus pavers that are separated with little 1/8 inch rock, which you are using regularly,
Right.
and that would be acceptable. It has to be permeable in some fashion.
So this would apply to all parking outside of the 20-foot drive aisle?
unless approved by the director for instances where there's topographical issues that require something
Yeah, gotcha.
that so we could permit an impermeable something but it would count toward lot coverage, and it would have to have some kind of circumstance that warranted it.
Okay. Any further board discussion?
No.
Put it to a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. The motion carries. Okay, next item of new business, ordinance 23-13, text amendment to Chapter 31 of the Town Code, amending standards for scheduling council meetings, electing officers, and appointing board members. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in the staff report, you'll notice that all of these changes are to Chapter 31, which is part of the administrative code. So technically, the planning board doesn't have to, you're not asked to give a formal recommendation because this is not an ordinance that is under your jurisdiction. But because one of the changes involves the process for how the town council appoints boards and committees, we wanted to bring to your attention, and if you had any comments, we're glad to share those with the council as this ordinance moves on to them. So you don't have a formal role, but if you look at section 31 sorry, it's the third page. The changes on the third pages have to do with appointing members. It begins at the bottom of the second. If you have any comments on that that you wish to share with the council, we're giving you that opportunity tonight. If you don't need to take any action.
Okay. Anyone have any comments? What, no? James? Joe? No? I do not. Okay,
Okay?
looks good. Okay, next item, number 4, discussion of paint colors for commercial buildings.
All right, Mr. Chair, this is another one of those items from that list that we gave the council a couple months ago that they authorized us to look into a little further. This is one that we don't have. We're picking your brains. In other words, we don't have an answer for this. We don't know if any change is necessary, but we wanted to begin a discussion regarding paint colors because there's an issue that came up and we had a Board of Adjustment case relating to Tommy's Market. You may be familiar with it. During that discussion, staff, it is something that is, you see the wording there on page 1 that we highlighted. And there's obviously some subjectivity to that. So staff has to make a decision on whether a certain color appears to comply with those guidelines, with those standards or not. And it's not something that is as easily definable as a light coverage or a setback where you could just go out and measure it. So we're asking for your thoughts, and there's certainly no decision that needs to be made tonight. We just wanted to start a discussion and get your thoughts as to ways that maybe we could take a look at making this ordinance less subjective, if there are ways that we can better define that color, that choice of color for commercial buildings. I'd be glad to answer any questions that the board has.
Joe, has there been any other problems about colors except for the one you just described?
Well, sure. I mean, the only reason that became an issue is that they didn't check with us before they started painting. In many cases, most cases, we have an opportunity to talk through that with the applicant, with the property owner or contractor to decide on that. So every year, we probably have at least a couple businesses that we work with that maybe they come in with something really gaudy. I'll give the example in the staff report of the Super Wings. They were originally going to paint it that same bright yellow that they wanted. It was after the fire, and they wanted to paint it that same bright yellow that their other buildings on the Outer Banks are. And we said, no. You have to turn it down somewhat, make it more subtle. And, so we ended up with a color that's more toned down than other areas. That's one example, but there are probably several a year that we work with.
So we don't have a chart or anything, we're just going by what we think is the right thing.
Very subjective.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that if there isn't much going on, but it sounds like we have some that definitely require some looking at. I don't think there's something we can do right away with it, but I think a couple people could get together and just come up with some sort of a chart, perhaps, keeping it cool, or whatever we want to do, and what else could we do?
I have a question, Joe. I didn't know that this had gone before the Board of Adjustment. I heard it as community talk. What happened? What was the Board of Adjustment decision?
The board upheld, it was a split vote, but the board upheld the staff's decision, and the owners had to repaint the building a lesser, more subtle shade.
I see. And that's the more subtle shade now?
Correct.
It's much more muted, yes.
I just think this is an area that's hard, very hard to deal with. Thank you. Some subdivisions handle it by objection more than, or what's offensive more than, it's got to be one of these 50 different colors. I think it's very difficult. I think if people are reasonable, the language that you have here is maybe the best you're going to get. But anyway, I just think it's a very, and, in my subdivision as an example, we handle it on a what's offensive. If you don't like this purple, then, but I just think it's very difficult,
So I kind of went down a rabbit hole with this, with the wording of paint recolors shall be low reflectance. And I went down the light reflective value, which is part of the paint, but the problem with that is actually white is low, and that's super bright. And apparently we've had problems with people painting a really bright white and had to ask them to tone it down. Would it be possible to just go through town and decide, okay, this is our color palette, this is what we've already approved, it's obviously acceptable because we've allowed it in town, that becomes our base palette, and then if someone wants something that is subtle, neutral, or earth tone colors that shall relate to natural materials, we can add that paint color to our acceptable palette going forward.
There are communities that do that. Their ordinance isn't worded like, their ordinance is much more comprehensive. There's a lot of places that have historic districts
Certainly.
that do that actually have color palettes. So that is an option. There's a lot of detail, and probably the reason we don't do it now is it limits the flexibility of owners, but it also makes it clear, what is and isn't acceptable. So,
But just as an example, it would be something that they could visually look at, not saying that you have to pick one of these colors that we've already got in town on an existing building, but
I feel like when you look at a paint palette, the fly, you open it up.
Right.
There's levels, and there's different palettes. And Mark, you probably deal with this when owners are painting. You have, the historic colors, or the
Right.
and then you have the pastels, and if we can at least get to some kind of range, it will be helpful. But I think one of the things that our ordinance doesn't address is the fact that there's no permit requirement for this. So making sure that commercial property owners know this before they actually paint is probably something that we need to have instilled in this ordinance.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. You just need to, you can leave the ordinance the way it is. Just require a permit. That way, you'll stop them on the first day of painting, rather than when the people start complaining about it. No, commercial developers aren't, they're different in my experience from residential paint projects and that they don't really care. They just don't want to have to do it twice. I mean, some of them care, but not that much. Not more than willing to sit down and have a very subjective conversation with you about it. So I'd say just require a permit, keep the permit fee minimal. Then you'd at least be getting paid for your time discussing paint colors with the, and I think that'd go a long way.
And they don't have to do it again because they got it approved the first time.
I'm responsible for that in our association, and what Sandy just said is exactly what I do. Okay, it might not come out all the time, but that's what I do. They cannot do anything unless they ask us first. And then you look it over, okay? Sometimes we make a mistake, but, you know, it works. So I don't think there's any reason to get tied up with this too much, except something like that.
So the consensus is to have a permit requirement versus a change in the ordinance. And is that something we need to put in the ordinance?
No,
Okay.
what we would need to do a procedural change with the council.
Okay.
And, I mean, I assume you just shoot that out to the business community. Hey, newsflash, you got to get a permit to paint.
One part of that is the educational process on our part, yeah. Absolutely. Cindy puts together, you know, for those of you who maybe don't get a copy of it, we do a biannual letter to the business community that covers everything from trash pickup to, you know, it covers a whole gamut of issues. And, you know, it tries to advise them. And this is something that could be added to that.
Is that the consensus of the board?
It seems simple and
Okay.
pretty clean.
Okay, next item. Number 5,
Right.
planning topic, the article in defense of zoning.
All right,
Jeff?
since we had a relatively lighter agenda, we've been waiting, and then next month we might have more for you. We decided to go ahead this month and just have a topic for discussion, so we included a copy of a report that we, you know, I'm a member, Jim is a member of the American Planning Association. And as part of that, one of the things we get, that we order is this little publication called Zoning Practice. And it deals with different topics. And recently, you'll notice the date on this is interesting, and that it's one of the most recent editions in May of this year. You're wondering, zoning has been around for over 100 years, so why is it a hot topic today? You know, and the answer to that is that there are communities and state governments that are out there actively looking at getting rid of zoning. And this is an article that makes an argument for the reasons why we have zoning and why this author feels that it's still very important and relevant for communities today. So they do go back, and curiously enough, I was going to have a slideshow, but they had one of the main slides. You know, zoning, as I mentioned, started over 100 years ago, and they have a picture on page 5 of one of the reasons why we have zoning. There was a great social reformer named Jacob Riis who won a Pulitzer Prize, I believe. And anyway, he wrote a book and it was a photo essay that accompanied it called How the Other Half Lives. And so it was all the people who lived out in the suburbs or the richer areas of town. And it showed how people lived in the tenement houses, how they lived right next door to these big industrial plants spewing out smoke and other pollutants. And it really got people riled up, and that's when zoning started to happen. People said, no one should have to live next to an industrial area. So they started zoning as a way to separate those uses and to really, is the first time on that scale that people began to look at how communities were put together, where uses were appropriate, where they weren't. And that's how zoning started. And I guess, we're not like a lot of other communities in the way that Duck functions on a day-to-day basis. We are a primarily tourist-driven economy, and we don't have the commuting and the need for other types of business that other areas of the state and country have. But it's still important for us in terms of looking at defining areas where certain activities are appropriate or not appropriate, and what types of activities are important to our community, and what types we really don't want to see in our community. So for those reasons, we think it's still, a relevant thing for us here in Duck, certainly, as a way of development standards. So I just want to give that preface and the article and see if anyone else had anything they wanted to talk about in terms of zoning and why we have it and that type of thing.
I did want to add one little addition to that. Our crackpot in the back, Jim Gould, informed me today, as a matter of fact, that North Carolina is celebrating its 100th year of zoning. It says Chapter 250 was ratified and enacted on March 5th, 2019, 100th anniversary of the North Carolina Zoning Enabling Act. So,
Nice work,
tidbit.
Jim.
Thanks.
I heard a story on NPR about this very thing this very week. So I
wonder
thought it was
why.
interesting that it was in my packet.
So let me just say an example of, there are things that are being pushed by our state home builders association. And in Duck, we already allow accessory dwelling units, so it's not really an issue for us. But there are things like that. That's an example of the type of things that are happening throughout the country. Other areas are allowing they have to have, there are other states that allow duplexes. Anywhere you could build a single family home, you can now build two. And I'm not sure about Southern Shores, whether they allow it.
It seems like a good idea, and that would really help with the.
We don't enforce those, but, there are other reasons why someone might not be able to build an ADU, but most of the communities in Dare County, if not all, presently have allowances for accessory dwelling.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I read the article, this is Jim back here. Another thing to point out was the reduction of minimum parking requirements, or the elimination of that in some areas. I found that interesting, it was specifically mentioned in there also.
And those are the things that what Jim mentioned is that there are states or cities, many cities do that. Asheville was doing that when I was there 20 years ago. But the difference is that in Asheville, we had on-street parking and we built parking garages. So in other words, the local government was subsidizing the downtown development by not requiring parking, but providing it themselves.
Are we looking at parking? Did council ask us to do that at some point this year?
We are, we've had a study done for a number of years that you remember Savannah Newbern, our intern, had put together some figures and done an analysis a number of years ago, but the council did ask staff to take a look at
Opportunities.
yeah, to see if there are any opportunities for that
And
type
restrooms.
of thing.
Parking and restrooms is one of the things they want us to be looking for.
I have started to develop a survey or a questionnaire that would basically attempt to understand how people are getting around our community. You know, are they driving more? Are they biking more? Are they walking more? So understanding how people get to certain places could have a profound impact on the need for parking in those areas.
And that'll tie into the commercial standards, which we brought up several months ago, probably April, May timeframe. And we'll be coming back, we'll be circling back to that soon.
Yeah, that was what I was asking, if we were going to hear about it again. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Any other planning comments? Item 5? Okay.
Thank you, that was a nice article.
Yeah.
Appreciated
That
it.
was interesting.
Okay.
All right, we'll go to number 6, approval of the minutes. Any corrections?
I move they be approved as presented.
Second? Oh, Sandy? Oh,
We'll put your name right there beside mine.
okay. So we're going to note Sandy's absence. Okay. I'll second with the noted correction.
I'll second.
Okay.
That
I'll-
correction.
Joe has seconded with that correction. All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. Okay. Item number 7, staff comments. Joe?
Mr. Chairman, it's evidence by your busy meeting last month. You had a lot of items that went on to the council. Just to give you an update, the council did hold the public hearing and approved the proposed definition for drug paraphernalia sales. So that has been approved. And then they set public hearings for 4 different ordinances, including the duties of the planning board, that we spent several months looking at. The wireless telecommunication changes, the ordinance authorizing the Board of Adjustment to grant continuances. And the ordinance that deals with this board's review of special use permits. So for those of you who had a chance to listen in on that meeting, the first three of those were, they had a typical about a discussion, and they said the hearing. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not the council, they just bounce around the pros and cons of having the planning board as part of that procedure. So just so you know, that's likely to have a lot of discussion before the council considers it, but they did set a public hearing on all four of those items for their meeting on September the 6th. So all four of those will go. Sandy also had a good opportunity to present the council with the list, the annual update of our hazard mitigation plan. And just, all we're doing is something we have to submit annually. And what she does is, it takes a lot of her time, but she has to go in and work with different departments to figure out what are the things that we have done to move some of these goals and projects forward. So she presented that to them as well. And Mr. Chair, that was what the things that the council dealt with at their meeting. And I'll let Cindy talk about some of the projects that our departments are working with.
Pretty sure I probably mentioned last month that we had the bid opening for the brick project, which is the road raising project from Dune Road to Barrier Island. We did get 2 bids. They are way over budget. So we are working towards some value engineering to reduce those costs, and then council's going to look at that at a special meeting on August 21st. And hopefully, following that meeting, we'll have the go-ahead to get moving on that project. In the meantime, I'm working feverishly to get all the easements in place that are necessary for that project. Also working on easements for the trail improvements at Ocean Crest. And when we had the bid opening on July 11th, we also kicked off our NC West, our West Side feasibility study. So from Aqua to the south end of town, we're looking at the possibility of a trail, and we're trying to figure out what that would entail. Summer beach planting is underway. We have a paid contractor, Emerald Forest, that's here now, and they're working to plant sea oats and bitter panic grass along the ocean front. And then last but not least, Jim is going to be having a duck sweep on Friday morning at 7 a.m. So if you want to come out and join the fun to keep our town beautiful and clean, please do. We meet over at the shed. Did I miss anything? That's all I got.
All right. And that included project updates?
That was project updates.
Yeah, okay. Board comment?
Did I miss some? Did I miss something?
No, I don't
I
think
thought
so.
it was great.
I thought it was excellent. Board comments?
I have nothing tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. A couple years ago, we had a pedestrian and traffic study completed. That was 2021. And we have funding this year to start working on those. So we're in the midst of getting all that information together, and we'll be putting out for bids for some crosswalk improvements.
So a lot of it is related to crosswalk improvements in Dark Village and north and south. So we're doing it somewhere with the lights, where we installed the lights at some of the other other crosswalks, but
And a lot of it's just tweaking stuff.
Like lights to illuminate, not like red light, green light.
Right, correct.
Does that include the overpasses for the pedestrians? No, okay. Just checking. All right, board comments? Ren,
No.
James, Joe?
No, sir.
Okey doke. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We're adjourned.